For the third straight year, the Michigan Wolverines take down their bitter rival, Ohio State, in the game. Rod Moore right there. The game-clinching pick against Kyle McCord, and the Wolverines still with a shot to make the college football playoff, and it's looking really good at this moment. Time to bring in CBS Sports college football playoff expert Jerry Palm and national college football writer for 24/7 Sports, Brad Crawford. And all Michigan has to do now is beat Iowa in the Big Ten title game, and they're in the playoff. As for Ohio State, Brad, what chances do the one-loss Buckeyes have to somehow, some way, somewhere make the college football playoff?
I'll tell you what, Chris, I'm not sure there's a path now since so many unbeaten teams right behind Ohio State kept winning. You know, there were no upsets after that early noon game Buckeyes lost. And all those teams now are going to play next weekend and have a chance to add that trump card to the resume, a conference championship. So I think Ryan Day last season got somewhat of a pass because he backed into the playoff despite losing to Michigan. But this time around, an Orange Bowl berth just ain't going to cut it in Columbus. And that was a bad loss for Ohio State today and its playoff chances.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for any one-loss team that doesn't win their league to get into the college football playoff this year because the competition is so tough. Last year, the competition for that fourth spot wasn't nearly as difficult as it is this year for Ohio State. So I think Ohio State is not going to make it, barring something really chaotic here in championship weekend. I don't have it off the top of my head. There probably is something chaotic that could happen. Multiple undefeated teams losing maybe could open a door, but Ohio State's, it's out of their hands now. They're 11-1. They're done playing, and I don't know what path there is for Ohio State to the college football playoff, but it certainly is going to take a lot.
Yeah, it'd probably take a miracle for that to happen for Ohio State to get back into the college football playoff. Okay, how about Florida State? They beat Florida in the swamp. Wasn't pretty, but they got it done. That's all that matters. Now they face Louisville in the ACC title game. Brad, is it as simple as the Seminoles beat Louisville and they're in the playoff, or is it a little bit more complicated because, I guess, for lack of a better word, their record this year is not as sexy as some of the other teams that are in position for the playoff?
Yeah, I don't see this selection committee, Chris, leaving out a 13-0 FSU, even with Tate Rodemaker as a starting quarterback. Obviously, Florida State right now is clearly leaking oil. Had a 2-touchdown deficit tonight in Gainesville, but managed to come back and win behind Trey Benson and his 3 touchdowns. Everybody, including all of us on this call, keeps waiting on FSU to lose a game here down the stretch, and namely those one-loss teams behind the Seminoles, and the Noles just aren't listening. Mike Norvell and those guys, 12-0 now, and now they're 1 win away over Louisville, away from clinching at worst the number 4 seed in the playoff.
Yeah, I got Florida State in the playoff as an undefeated team as well. This committee has never left out a major conference undefeated team. They're not going to start with Florida State just because their quarterback's not there. If they get to 13-0, they'll have won 2 full games with their backup quarterback over good teams. So, you know, and that the rivalry games, you can't get too excited about that. I mean, Alabama needed divine intervention to win a rivalry game on the road against a similar opponent in Auburn, and Louisville lost their rivalry game. It's not easy, these games. So, you know, you can't get too excited about how they perform in these games as long as you get the W. The W next week is going to be huge. It would have been better for Florida State if Louisville hadn't lost for their strength of schedule, but we're talking about playoff seed if they're 13-0. We're not talking about playoff selection.
I would be shocked if Florida State does not get into the playoff if they do indeed take down the Louisville Cardinals. Now, Washington in the Pac-12 escaped against the Cougars with a last-second field goal by Grady Gross after the team literally tried to throw the game away, which means we have a spicy rematch, gentlemen, in the Pac-12 title game versus Oregon. And my question to you, Brad, what case would the Huskies have to make the playoff if they lose to Oregon? Because they would be a one-loss team and they have a whole bunch of wins against ranked opponents.
The thing is, Washington ranks pretty low in game control because they've got 8 straight wins in games that it's been a single possession in the fourth quarter or later, including an overtime win. So Washington's not exactly blowing out the competition in a very good conference out there in the Pac-12. However, like FSU, Kalen DeBoer's team just keeps winning. They keep executing in these late game situations. They get to the Pac-12 championship next Friday night now against Oregon, knowing they're one win away. But there's no scenario I see that the Pac-12 can get two teams in. It's either Washington or it's Oregon, but probably that number 3 seed.
Yeah, Washington, it'll be weird. If they lose to Oregon, both of those teams will be 12-1, and they will have each beaten each other for the one loss. So, but Oregon would definitely be ahead as the conference champion. 12-1 Washington versus, say, 11-1 Ohio State, if there's enough chaos to open the door for either of those teams, would be an interesting decision for this committee. They might go with Ohio State, but, like I said before, one loss and you didn't win your league, you're going to have a tough time getting into the college football playoff this year. And that goes for, by the way, Georgia if they lose to Alabama, or even Michigan if they lose to Iowa. Although if both of those things happen, they got to take somebody.
Yeah, you can't keep everybody out right. Now, when you look at Oregon, Brad, if they win an exact revenge on the Huskies, it's pretty much a lock, right, for them to be in the Final Four?
It's going to be very interesting to see which team the committee puts in between Oregon and Texas. In my opinion, the Longhorns needed Oklahoma State to lose to play Oklahoma next week in the Big 12 championship game. Instead, they get to play the Cowboys team that is not, it's not an elite team. It's not a top 15 team. So I still think the Texas win at Bama is going to hold water. Bama winning the Iron Bowl today. But like you said, it's going to be very interesting to see who the committee takes at a 12-1 conference champion. Is it Oregon, who has, prior to this week's best win was against Utah prior to that Oregon State win, or is it going to be Texas that has played lights out in the last few weeks? And by the way, Texas beat Texas Tech by 50 on Friday night. That's a team Oregon beat by 8 this season.
So with all that being said, Brad, who is your biggest college football riser with all the games that came down to the wire, where most of the top 25 teams, large majority of them, still came out with a W?
Not only is Michigan my biggest riser this week, but Sharon Moore has to be a head coach somewhere. If not 2024, it's going to be the following season. He flat out coached Ryan Day, the most important game of the season, and he got it done. The Wolverines, in my opinion, are locked into a playoff berth now, regardless of what happens next week, for the 3rd consecutive season. We all had questions if Michigan was as good as advertised because of this soft Big Ten schedule. In the last couple of weeks, the Wolverines have showed out in a big way, and it's all because of Sharon Moore and Jim Harbaugh's absence.
Sharon Moore coached circles around Ryan Day. That is such an indictment on Day and really a testament to what Sharon Moore and the Wolverines program were able to do, really making aggressive calls. Okay, on the other side, Jerry, who is your biggest college football faller from this week?
Well, it's got to be Louisville. Only because there aren't that many teams that lost, but Louisville, the highest ranked team that lost. Actually, Louisville, first of all, is still going to get the Orange Bowl spot, even if they lose to Florida State, because they beat NC State at home, and the committee is not going to put them below NC State. But they're going to fall in the rankings the hardest, in part because, they lost to a Kentucky team. They lost to them at home. Not that Kentucky's bad, but it's just the kind of a loss that when you look at the teams you're competing with to stay up there in the rankings is going to knock Louisville down a notch. And I want to address Oregon and Texas. All of the stuff Brad said about Oregon and Texas is true now. And Oregon has been ahead of Texas every single week. If Oregon beats Washington and Texas wins the Big 12, Oregon is still going to be ahead of Texas because nothing changed that would change the mind of this committee.
All right, there you have it. How about, Brad, your top 10 prediction for the college football playoff rankings, which come out this Tuesday?
Yeah, I think Tuesday night, Georgia will be the undisputed #1 team, 29 straight wins, SEC record now after beating Georgia Tech. #2 will be Michigan. I've got Washington in the 3 spot, another unbeaten. FSU hanging on there at #4. And then 5 through 10 is sort of questionable. You've got 1 loss Oregon, 1 loss Texas. And then Ohio State. Where does the committee put the Buckeyes after losing to Michigan? Are they going to put them 5th? Are they going to put them 7th or 8th? How far ahead of Bama are they going to be? And then the last 2 spots in the 9-10, I've got Missouri and Penn State. Missouri has locked in what I think will be a Cotton Bowl berth after that big win over Arkansas.
Yeah, I think the top 10 is going to look a lot the same. Ohio State is going to drop, I think, 5th or 6th. wherever they decide to put Oregon, because Oregon has been so dominant. But 5, 6, 7 could be in. Oregon will be ahead of Texas, and then Ohio State will slot in there somewhere. And then, number 10 Louisville loses, number 11 Penn State will move up. It'll look a lot like last week's rankings.
And if you want more college football coverage and analysis, make sure to download and subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast. For Danny Cannell, Tom Fornelli, Bud Elliott, and Chip Patterson, we'll break down some of the hottest storylines going on in the college football landscape and also on the recruiting front. Download the Cover 3 podcast